as possible. That help everybody.
Closer?
Yeah, if you can, please. Thank you.
Don't want to break anything. Oops. Will it do?
Thank you, that'll do, yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming here. We would be happy to come to your offices and talk to your presenters at any given moment. Now is not the good time. We are preoccupied mostly with organizing the defense, helping Ukraine to survive, talking to your own government and governments, talking to people, MPs, just average Britons all over UK and much outside of the United Kingdom. What we are trying to do to tell you the truth, and you don't have to do much because your people in Ukraine right now are doing a very courageous job, going all the places and seeing and reporting what they actually see. We will be able to discuss with you and talk about whatever the questions you have, but just to kickstart our today's conversation, we don't believe that this is operation, the special operation which Putin calls it. We see that it's full-scale attack against us. The idea he has, and he described it, to denazify, whatever, to take the Nazis from Ukraine. This is an attack against us, against Ukrainians. We don't want to be freed from anybody. We are on our land. We are not provoking him, neither are our neighbors. One of these neighbors just betrayed us. That's Belarus. We've seen attacks from their territory. We've seen the cruise missiles coming from there. We see tanks rolling over our border with Belarus. This is something very unexpected. We knew how bad the dictator, but we didn't expect that Belarusians will betray us as a nation, as a friendly nation on our north. Russians came from all four sides. They're trying to take all of our territory. They're taking a couple of towns. We see people being killed, both civilians and military personnel. We don't have the exact number, but the number you see on the Ukrainian media and your media reporting from Ukraine are correct. We can report of those. You can actually check our headquarters of Ukrainian armed forces to see the losses. But we're putting up a real fight. We're trying to get as many Russians to another world as possible as well. Tanks, helicopters, planes being shot down. We are defending our land. Unfortunately, some of the places very difficult to defend. They now block the whole sea. We can have access to the Black Sea and Sea of Azov. They started it and blocked it and formally explained it as anti-terrorist attack in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, which, limiting our capabilities of bringing the reinforcement or even the supplies. One of the supplies we will need quite soon, quite critically. There is not just military supplies, but humanitarian supplies, the fuels, because they are targeting specifically fuel depots and the infrastructure, critical infrastructure, dams, bridges. Now they try it, and at the process we are fighting over the airfield of Antonov Air Design Bureau, which is 15 minutes, 20 minutes from Kyiv, civilian airport belonging to Antonov Air Company. So that's more or less the situation right now on the ground. I'm more than happy to talk to you and have your specific questions. Thank you.
Prime Minister, Sky News. Can I just ask you, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he is going to announce some tougher sanctions later today. What specific sanctions do you want to see? And are you disappointed that the SWIFT banking system hasn't come into play to be restricted?
I prepared for each and every one of you. I'll give it to you. This is the list of sanctions. In the financial sphere only, you will have it by the end of this conversation. But the SWIFT is here as well.
So you want the SWIFT system?
We want SWIFT. We want the Russian Central Bank to be sanctioned. We have a list of very heavy sanctions. We believe that these sanctions, if they are introduced, will have Putin seriously to reconsider what he is doing.
But it seems that SWIFT is not going to be introduced.
As of now, we don't see it. I know that it was discussed. It was referred as very grave and hellish sanctions. But for many reasons, they are not introduced yet. I hope that after our conversations with the UK, we will see how the new sanctions updated.
I just have another question, which is, you are facing one of the most powerful armies in the world. Do you actually need military support in terms of boots on the ground to be able to stand any chance to repel this attack?
At this particular moment, we have enough people. We don't have enough equipment.
So you need more equipment for
yes, but we were quite open. I myself was quite open, telling that at a particular time when our existence as a nation, as 40 million nation, would come to real question. We will ask everything on top of equipment support, financial support, fuels, humanitarian aid, everything we've been already discussing.
Greg Mackenzie from BBC News. In terms of the British government and the wider community, you kind of answered it just there. What more do you want to see in terms of this coming to an end?
We wanted something which only NATO can provide. We wanted no-fly zone over Ukraine. This is very serious, very professional military talk, which we have to have with your people, with the rest of NATO allies. It is very serious, dramatic move. I'm not pre-telling right now what would come as a result of this conversation, but this is radical conversation. We'll have to talk. Everything else we're discussing right now. Our ministers of defense will talk in around 4 or 5 hours. We will just hand it over the request of some particular equipment. We're using, by the way, those equipment which was provided by you, and NLAVs were used today, Bayraktars were used today to destroy our Russian tanks and armored vehicles.
And do you think he can be stopped?
We hope, all of us hope, that he will be stopped. The losses are already unbearable, at least for us. Maybe he can survive these losses. Maybe his society is not prepared, like ourselves, to cherish each and every life. For us, it's very painful.
And just lastly, in terms of you being here and not in Ukraine, and the future for you, maybe the possibility that you might never be able to go back. How does that feel?
We haven't been considering. We have we had the meeting today with the embassy because all of us have their families back, the parents, the brothers, sisters. It's very painful for us. At the same time, we know how many of your nationals are in Ukraine right now. We are in consultation with your governments how to get these people out, how to help those citizens, and even Ukrainian citizens who are members of the family. So this is a very painful and very difficult conversation we have to have right now to find out how we can help them. Don't forget that the sky is closed. We did it because we want to avoid any danger to any commercial flights of any nations. Remember MH17, how they've been shot down by the separatists over our territory, but in controlled sphere of it. We wanted to avoid this. We now have to understand how we can actually get people in and out. The sea is blocked. We have only, that's the western borders of Ukraine, land bridge.
And Ambassador, are you expecting any more escalation in Kyiv itself, other than what we've seen so
15
far?
minutes from Kyiv, this airport, if they take over this airport, they will use it for the paratroopers and heavy ammunition, heavy tanks to get, because from the border by land, you will have to cross 100 kilometers of well defended roads and the fields. And Ukrainians are fighting right now. They are close to Kharkiv, which is second biggest city. They took a couple of smaller towns on the south of Ukraine. They came from Crimea, where they stationed, because we allowed them in 1991 to stay until 2017. We always knew that we have to get rid of them because sooner or later they will use these bases. Now they're using against us. They're coming into southern parts of the Ukrainian mainland, trying probably to secure this water channel, which is coming from major Ukrainian river Dnieper, which used to supply Crimea when Crimea was part of Ukrainian territory.
So you are expecting Russian ground forces, if they can manage, you are expecting them in the capital, in Kyiv?
We talked with our government, with our ministers, and the situation in Kyiv as well. These groups of saboteurs, even police, the internal forces, the National Guard. It's not just for the armed forces. They're fighting with them now.
And can I just ask you, in the run-up to this, your president had a very calm tone. He was, as we all understand, trying not to stoke too much panic, but it seems that most Ukrainians really didn't expect this huge scale of the attack. Were you prepared enough as a country, as a government? Did this come as a bit of a surprise, maybe even for you, the scale of it?
Some Ukrainians believe that we would be much better prepared if we did not allow our nuclear weapons to be transferred to Russia in 1994 in exchange of guarantees, which are obviously not working. They failed to divert this attack, which is happening right now. The rest of the Ukrainians believe that we will live in a marriage within the Soviet Union, if you want me to put this way, for so many years that they wouldn't come to kill their brothers and sisters. We have so many family contacts, so many business contacts, cultural contacts. That's why Ukrainians could not even wrap their head around this, how it can actually happen. Zelensky, the president himself, he lived in Moscow. He was mentioned for a couple of times for 10 years, working there. So for many Ukrainians, it's unthinkable.
So So it's fair to say that for a lot of the Ukrainian population, just the sheer scale of the attack came as a bit of a surprise.
And the scale, although talking to most of the, and I had the privilege to talk, we were discussing most of the ways, and most of the ways we sort of foresaw at that time were now happening. Like they're coming through the excursion zone of Chernobyl. This zone is not protected because there is radiation, nobody lives there. They now came through this particular unprotected part of our borders through Belarusian territory. So everything is happening as we saw it before.
And just also want to ask you, do you think that President Zelensky and the rest of the government took the intelligence warnings from the US and UK side seriously in the run-up to the crisis when they were saying that they do expect a large-scale invasion to happen?
Being today, where I am now and where we all of us now, we can say that we should have started much earlier, maybe decades ago, to invest more in our army, to prepare ourselves. Not many people in Ukraine believed that we had. That's why we were actually trying to get into NATO all these years, because we always believed that they would come. But how real it is, when there's a difference between what you do as a political figure, a political person, and what you're actually preparing your nation to sacrifice to defend ourselves. We had probably to divert more of our budget, and it's not huge, for the army. We had to increase the number of people to be able to defend. But the war is not over. We are fighting right now. People are dying as we speak.
Можна українською питання? Да? Якщо коротко, то основні наші пропозиції, вимоги – це SWIFT, амуніція та закрите небо.
Я вам передам зараз ви побачите. We are talking about what we expect to be done in Ukraine for Ukrainian public as well. Припинити операції в російському рублі, санкціонувати Центральний банк Росії, прикрити SWIFT, відключити від Visa і MasterCard, всі рахунки за кордоном, які належать руським громадянам, викинути звідси олігархів, які знаходяться в Лондоні в цій системі фінансовій. Це багато заходів, які зробляться. We will hand over all of it, that's enough copies for each and every one of you. I will. Okay, absolutely. I will do it. The ban energy trade with Russia. This is very painful. I understand it won't be easier for many nations, but that's something which we believe has the most of effect. The ban foreign investments in Russia, prohibit Western governments' pension funds from investing in Russian assets. Sanction secondary trading of Russian debts and equities. Sanction Russian central bank. We believe that's something even harder than SWIFT. The SWIFT is also here. The withdraw Russia out of bond and equity investment indexes. Disconnect Russia from Visa and MasterCard, freeze foreign Russian assets, sanction Russian direct investments funds, and expand personal sanctions to all those in Western lists of sanctions and their families, freeze of assets, visa cancellation, passport revocation, and repatriation back to Russia. That's the whole list. You will have the copy each and every one of them.
Will that list be enough to stop Vladimir Putin continuing this?
I would be happy to see NATO forces on our land to be able really to stop them. We have to fight ourselves. We are doing it right now. We will see how the sanctions, if they are introduced, what effect they will have.
But you would like to see NATO forces going into Ukraine?
Me personally, yes. I was Ukrainian Ambassador to NATO. I understand that this force exists in our part of the globe who can match the mighty Red Army.
And just one more question. Do you think that the UK needs to be a bit stricter for the oligarchs, the Russian oligarchs that are here and that have made a home here, that have close ties to Putin's regime?
We're one of those nations who can share our own experience, how Russian dirty money can corrupt our system. And this money, especially with the gas trade and oil trade, corrupted our system to the bone. That's how most of the Ukrainian oligarchs appeared on the map of an existence. So everybody who touches the money this touches, any system, any banking system, any nation, they will bring this devastation at the end. So the London, the Great Britain doesn't have to follow this example. They can learn from our experience that this money, most of them just stolen from the Russian people, from the Russian land, from the resources. They actually corrupting everything they touch.
And just finally, if you could just say something to Boris Johnson now, what would you say?
I hope that I will be able to tell him as soon as we have this initial, and Boris Johnson was talking to President Zelensky today, and he had a call at 5 a.m., if not mistaken, We had this ongoing debate. We are trying to understand what can be done right now, what sort of military assistance, financial assistance can be provided right now, and what is the collective sort of stance of and collective response of West could be.
Mr. Ambassador, Ricky Friller from Talk Radio. Do you see a point in time this week where we could see a civilian army fighting in the streets of Kyiv?
Kyiv is a big city, it's 3 million, but the Kharkiv next to it is 2.5 million. There are a couple of cities and millions. We have western cities which now they're hosting the most of the embassies and some Ukrainian structures. So Kyiv is important, but Ukrainians will fight for many, many other cities as well.
And are you aware of how many Ukrainians have travelled back to Ukraine before the flying ban came in? How many have flown back to fight?
We don't know the exact number because many flights were cancelled. Ukrainian airlines were flying to the very end, but many airlines from the civilized nations like KML, Lufthansa, they cancelled days before. So we don't understand how many of them were managed to get into. I can tell you that, for example, my minister couldn't get in Ukraine. He was flying from Washington and New York where he had all the meetings and Security Council meeting. He could not get into Ukraine. Now he is going by land, landed in one of the European cities. So there is no exact number. I can tell you that we have 20 million people around the globe as Ukrainian community, and we will call upon them to support Ukraine right now when we need it. We have 40 million nation and with 20 million Ukrainians abroad.
And how many casualties would be too many? At what point would you ever give in?
We're quite resilient people. We've been through artificial famine. We've been through Chernobyl. We suffered a lot after the Second World War and within all the wars. This land sometimes called the bloodlands of Europe. So people suffer for all their existence. They are quite resilient. They know how to fight. Unfortunately, they also know history of being dying too.
PA Media, what do you think Putin's endgame is?
I believe that he wanted to get Soviet Union back, and for this he won't stop at anything. Now he has Kazakhstan and Belarus. By the way, two more nations which signed the Budapest Memorandum, giving up the nuclear weapons, which ended up in their territory when Soviet Union collapsed. Now all of these promises have been broken, and Russia is now getting to these nations back to get them onto the new project. I don't even know how Putin wants to call it. In his recent remarks, he was messing up the Russian monarchy, Russian Empire, Soviet Union. That's the same, more or less the same for him. It's also the same for us. We also consider it as a Russia, just in different projects. Whatever the new project will be called, we don't know, but we understand that the same Russia is getting back and trying to get this territory of Slavic tribes. And he believes for some his personal reason, and you probably heard this amateurish lesson of history, that how he hated us, calling us a historic mistake which has to be fixed.
Mr. Ambassador, ITV News. Are you disappointed with Boris Johnson and other Western leaders for not intervening earlier and not ensuring that this didn't get to this point already? Should they have been doing more in the months previous to stop this from happening?
I'm disappointed with many Western leaders. I'm not disappointed with the response I'm receiving here. And not from just government, but also I had today a chance to talk to the leaders of opposition parties, at least two, just ended up. And this is a very unique moment when having all the differences, and we're observing as diplomats all the difference in political differences here, but they all united in supporting Ukraine. That's what we see, and that's what they're talking again. They're recognizing that this is a unique moment when the whole politicum of United Kingdom is united behind this support to Ukraine.
What more do you think Boris Johnson needs to be doing at this point to ensure that things don't escalate further beyond sanctions?
I believe that what is dramatically needed is coordination. We are coordinating on a very high level. Our leaders are talking to each other, and by the end of the day today, our ministers, both ministers of defense and foreign affairs, will talk to both ministers of defense and foreign affairs, and they will be able to create. I need personally, as ambassador here, more coordination on the level of tactical level right now, right here, through this embassy. That's because we receive all the requests we need right now, and something is needed from your side, like this British nationals, to be able to be evacuated. What the channels, how we can get humanitarian aid in Ukraine. All these things have to be resolved right now, right away. That's where we can actually really ramp up the cooperation.
Ambassador, Sky News again. How financially, militarily? Are we talking months? Are we talking years? Are we talking weeks?
At the last war, Ukraine was totally occupied by Nazis. We never stopped the guerrilla war. Partisans were operating all this long 5 years. I don't know how long Ukrainians will have to suffer again, but people are really motivated, to fight to the last one of us. And over these 8 years, it's not something new to us. We already lost by this day 13,500 people. I'm just scared to consider what the new number is, to see it. But Ukrainians were fighting. We have so many people went through it, both men and women. Where war is not discriminating in our case. So 500 veterans are already. We have lines of people to sign up for the army. And in the supermarkets, you can see that the shelves with the bread are full. But in the hunting supermarkets, we're scared. We don't see any bullets, any cartridges. People are taking this first. They are preparing to fight to the very end. We will see how we can avoid this. Nobody wants to have it on our soil. We don't want to kill Russians. They come to our place. We didn't provoke them. We didn't want anything at all, even their gas. We don't need anything from them.
And just on the supply issue, with the sea route blocked and the western route being the only available one, how jeopardizes that route from shelling and from other Russian forces?
That's what we will have to provide, talking to our Western partners. And we're already doing mostly with our Polish friends. And this is friendly nation, our neighbor, and our same tribes talking almost the same language. It's easier to understand. And this nation was suffering from Russian occupation, invasions through all our history. So we know to whom we can address and we know who will be able to stand with us.
What do you need them to do?
We need them to provide, to help us to secure this corridor.
So militarily to provide?
They will do it on their side anyways. They're scared because Russians are getting closer to them. They are already, Poles are preparing right now as we speak. We're not expecting them to come over and help us in our lands, but they will have to reinforce their own borders, that's for sure. And NATO is supporting them. Your people, your military personnel in Romania, in Estonia, in Poland. But unfortunately, we are not a part of the family. That's the craziest thing.
Are you frustrated that you haven't been made part of the NATO family, despite the efforts? And obviously something.
I spent my professional life trying to get into. Before the Bucharest summit, I was one of those negotiation team to NATO before 2008. And was ambassador to NATO. I understand that's the only chance for us to survive. And I'm not blaming anybody. We are to blame first. We should have done better to be now a part of the family and expecting that somebody will help us at the time of need. It's not like we want to get NATO engaged in conflict, but we wanted to have the same level of security as your people on the streets are, enjoying. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the paper. You don't have to take notes. This is papers for you. Thank you. Thank you.